Good afternoon, Jayden. How you doing? You well?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm blessed, always. Jayden, the British Council commission and yourself, they commissioned curators to present a new exhibition for the British Pavilion at the 18th International Architecture Exhibition of La Biennale de Venezia 2023. It's a bit of a mouthful, that's why I have to read it off.
Nicely put.
I have to read it off. Dancing Before the Moon is a series of new art installations on an architectural scale by yourself and 5 other artists and architects, alongside a new film and soundtrack. Now, I ain't finished. I need you to explain to us a bit more about the concept behind your installation, Funda and Shimshek. Have I got that right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And how it reflects the hybridized cultures and rituals of Trinidad and Cyprus, which is where I believe you descend from. Speak to me, my brother.
Yeah, well, that's. I'm so impressed that you got the Shimshek correct. You know, that's concept. My North London Turkish Cypriot friends will be happy. You know, it's to have a commission. We have to talk about the genesis of the commission, which is there's me and the 4 curators: Manisha Kelly, Joseph Henry, and Dimitri Upperman. There's also a role that my practice had at the beginning, which was always about the exhibition design. And from the initial pitch for this project, we always wanted to have a moment where the concept of the exhibition was presented immediately. When people looked at the pavilion, they knew what it was. And that meant that we had to do something on the portico. Anyway, that turned into one of the commissions, because what happens on the portico is basically an introduction to what happens in the pavilion, which is there are these architectural objects, sculptures, that speak to some of these films about rituals, people's heritage, the relationships to land, customs, traditions, activities. And so it caused a little bit of an introspection in myself. So I'm half Trinidadian and I'm half Turkish Cypriot. And I was thinking about my inherited culture, and I was saying, at the beginning, I thought it was a little disingenuous to be dealing with this inherited culture, because I'm a 3rd generation immigrant. My mum's side is Turkish Cypriot. I don't know my dad's side, but I know that they're Trinidadian. And I thought, well, I've never been to these islands as nations. And as through the process, then I realized it wasn't disingenuous. It was just really honest. Like, that is the nature of a lot of 3rd generation immigrants in the UK, that there is an inherited culture, but there is a distance. It's a distance imposed over time, or it's a distance imposed over geography. So it ended up me being in this world, and they're 2 vessel-like forms, and I love the idea of them being vessels, if you like, looking like passing ships, etc., because they have all of the references to kind of, they reference Britain and its previous empire. They reference the kind of slave trade, and why people ended up in the Caribbean. But also that they embody this idea of fragility to a certain moment where you can be incarcerated in them and held hostage by them, but also liberty, like vessels, you can get in them, you can go where you need to go. And so the analogy of these 2 vessels, if you like, 2 identical vessels, sitting in the portico of the pavilion, I really love, because that's the place of arrival, of departure, coming and going. And it's worth saying that they're also interdependent, right? They can't live without each other. They're bolted to each other. They're fixed to the pavilion itself. And that's really important, because what that says is, I am the product of this hybridized society. I am the sum of these 2 parts, but I'm also the sum of Britain, and it's these 2 parts colliding in Britain, and they're interdependent, and they can't exist without each other. So you need the infrastructure of this building, for better or for worse. That is what I am as a product. So yeah, they have the analogy of a vessel, but they also have the analogy of a pan and pan culture. And that's because there's obviously the reference to steel pan making in Trinidad and steel pan playing. Coincidentally, as a child, I was in the steel pan band. So even that inherited culture ends up in an oblique way somehow. So that's a reference to the rituals of steel pan making and playing. But then the other pan, if you like, the other vessel, is a reference to this pan that existed in my North London Turkish Cypriot grandparents' house, which was this makeshift grill that was at the centre of this garden, surrounded, where the family would come together and commune every 2 weeks, every week, every weekend, in the setting of vine leaves and fig leaves and, like proper Turkish setting where one commandeered the space. And I loved that. And I used the project as a little bit of an exploration into this heritage. Like, I know my Cypriot heritage quite well, but I don't know my Trinidadian heritage so well. And I thought it was really important that I started to connect with that. Now, I connected with these two fantastic people called Cyril Kamasi and Haroon Shah, both Trinidadian, both from San Fernando. Cyril Kamasi, and it's a bit contentious, right? But he will tell you that he invented the first polyphonic steel pan. He's 96 years old. And when I say polyphonic steel pan, I mean the steel pan that has all the various notes. The heritage. Are you with us, Joe?
I'm with you. Yeah, you froze for a second. I'm with you. I'm saying, is he still around? Is he still with us then, yeah?
He's still around. And he came. Haroon Shah is a carnival leader for Notting Hill. And they came to the workshop where we made these 2 4-meter long steel pans. And I really was into them. I wanted to work with Cyril to tune the note. I thought like the note that has some form of metric proportions to the space that people were given on slave ships, if that's to be played on the portico, then that note needs to be really resonant. Now, as it comes to pass, we never got to the stage where it has a specific resonance. But what they've done is they gave me lots of confidence that actually the history of steel pan making is a pioneering history of trial and error and experimentation. And these are experimental devices. So what they did is they came to the workshop where we were making them and they blessed them, if you like. Cyril was the first person to play this pan. We've got amazing footage of him playing it. Incredible, 96 years old. Still, they call him Scratcher Man, and he still plays the scratcher in his spare time. He's always in his house tuning these pans. So for me, that was really important because I think architecture and art is really at the center of those pursuits. Is us trying to work out our relationship between us and the world and our place within it. And for me to use this project as a vehicle to explore that has been a real privilege.
Talk about the materials and techniques you employed, to bring the large-scale sculptures to the exhibition.
Yeah, that's such a good question because the title of the work is Thunder and Shimshek, right? So the thunder, when conceived of the title, the thunder referred to the sonic element of steel pan playing, right? And the Shimshek, the thunderous noise, if you like, and the Shimshek referred to the lightning-like energy of the heat of the grill, like big energy at that moment. However, and I'm going to have to send you some assets in the background. When the pans are made in the traditional way in which you would make a steel pan, i.e. there's a skirt that kind of sits in the kind of vertical, the round stuff, and then you would have a flat plane on the top. And then the flat plane would be hammered in to make the concave plane. Now, to do that over 4 meters, you do that with an industrial hammer, like industrial pneumatic hammer, making a hell of a thunderous noise, like, and an industrial blowtorch. So there's a moment when I turned up in the workshop where the literal application of thunder and Shimshek was employed to make these 2 sculptures. It was incredible, such an amazing moment. So it's now taken on a bit of a double meaning, and they're made out of steel. Of course, they're made out of steel in reference to both of those objects. The one in my Turkish Cypriot setting, where it's kind of makeshift barbecue grill type thing, and obviously steel pans are made out of steel pan and made out of steel. So yeah, we've kept true to their material expression.
Bit about yourself, Jayden, because there's going to be those who are sitting there thinking, right, he's talking about a lot of stuff that I'm not sure about. How did you get into it? I know that you're a founding director of JA Projects, senior lecturer at Central St. Martin's, and a design advocate for the Mayor of London. So speak on your journey into this space.
I mean, I grew up in Bethnal Green, so I've always been a maker. I've always been making stuff. I've always been inventing stuff. I've always been making stuff and putting stuff in the world. And I've always been concerned about the world in which we live. And when I was young, I went through a couple of chance encounters. I said to myself, I'm interested in cities. Who builds cities, Like, who does that as a task? It's quite a mad thing to ask yourself at that moment. And also just to ask, because I was concerned about the way in which they live, that like they work, how do they operate, how do they develop? And finally, I found that architects play a really major role in the development of cities. Someone got me a job on the Olympics. This was in 2008, I think. Work experience. Imagine me, kid, Bethnal Green, Tower Hamlets, Olympic Games. Like, I was in Stratford going to raves at Club EQ, you know, like in the middle of water.
Man, come on, I was doing it with Shanola's night spot, so I get it. You know what I mean?
I think there's this thing where it was a place, and all of a sudden, something else is happening here, you know. And if you go to the Olympic Park today, it's a miracle what's happened to that place. Of course, we know that it had its grittiness, and with the grittiness came its glamour as well. Do you know what I mean? There's glamour attached to it. But you know, that idea of transformation, that there is this moment where you can produce miracles. And you know, in architecture, we build something from scratch. I think that's the process of making. Like, I'm addicted to that as a feeling. And even making these works, it's really amazing at this moment to see these works in this portico, because all of that stuff is just a figment of one's imagination. You know, so to be in that space and have that experience and exposure to the Olympics really gave me the bug. And it's a real privilege that we're doing that type of work now in the practice. You know, we're actually working in the Olympic Park. We're working to design the new permanent galleries for the V&A East, which is a new museum for 16 to 24-year-olds. Back in the day, you know, I was going to Club EQ as a 16 to 24-year-old. Now we're going to museums, and that's the way the world moves on a little bit, you know. But we're designing that stuff. I'm working in that space, design advisor for some quality review panels and reviewing big major schemes in the Olympic Park as well. So yeah, it's been I've been at this game for best part of 10 years. Best part of 10 years practicing. I've had exposure to architecture since 2008. So it's not really a world that people necessarily know about, but it is a really important one. And if you can get it, we do so much in the practice. We do everything from small scale stuff to big stuff. And I say that we're spread across the cultural range. We do stuff like the formal cultural stuff, which is museums, exhibitions, the artistic pursuits. And we also do the informal cultural stuff, like we're redeveloping a market in Newham. We've been looking at Hackney's town centre regeneration plan. We've designed 15 council homes for Southwark. You know, like we're dealing with the backdrop, the theatre to everyday life as much as the kind of formal theatre spaces.
Given your road, then when the British Council came a knocking, and given, you know, the gravitas of what you're a part of, you know, the oldest arts festival in the world, how did that feel personally? And, you know, where to next? Because it seems like you've done a lot very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's worth saying that the architecture Biennale, it doesn't work like the arts Biennale, where it's not an appointment, if you like, it's a competition.
Okay.
So you have to win this commission. Now, I've been burnt a couple of times by this commission. We've gone for it a couple of times in the past in different teams and stuff. So, but I knew when we got together as a team of curators, the energy was just right. We all work in the arts. Manisha Kelly's at the V&A Museum, Sumitra Uppham's at the Crafts Council. Joseph Henry works for the mayor in the culture team, dealing with these big developments. We know what that is. And we were just a WhatsApp group, and we decided to pitch for this as an idea. When we pitched for the idea, the submission was called Joy of a Black Planet, which is, you get the reference, right? You know, it's not fear of a black planet, you know, it's the joy of a black planet. And I think that was really important, right? We never really publicized that as a title, but it was a really important moment for us to pin our colors to the mast. We were saying, if you give us this commission, this is what we're going to do. And so, yeah, it's a really proud moment to have the British Pavilion, which sits on top of the hill in Giardini, in the world's most foremost arts Biennale and architecture Biennale, culture making. At the center of that culture making moment is a community of black and brown artists and makers. And I don't know the numbers, but I'd say that, yeah, we've got 6 artists exhibiting here, but we've got 4 curators. That's 10 already. We've probably got another 10 people involved in the film. There are loads of people dealing with the public program. I reckon we're about a community of 30 black and brown people, you know, either from the African diaspora, the Caribbean diaspora, or the South Asian diaspora. We can't be all things to all people, but what we can be is true to ourselves as curators. And so, yeah, that's a proud thing. Yeah, I'm proud of that.
I said 20 minutes, so I'm hoping they don't hold me to that. I've got a couple of more questions. Good. One of the last few questions I've got is, how do you believe your work challenges the conventional understanding of architecture and expands the notion of what architecture can encompass?
I think I've been thinking about this a lot, obviously, and I think there's a focus on rituals, right? Rituals, customs, traditions, activities that take place at a very human level. And I think as much as any kind of practical takeaway from the pavilion about making space or defining the tone of our cities, I think there is a sentiment which is to say that architecture shouldn't be an exclusive realm in which only architects can talk about it, that actually it touches people. Like I was talking to someone just earlier about housing. Everyone knows a house. Everyone knows their street. Like everyone knows that. And everyone knows these rituals that take place in daily life, whether that's a game of backgammon that I shared with my granddad in the pandemic in his garden, or whether it's more kind of banal stuff, just like the way in which you wash or the customs that were given to you in certain ways. So I think one is to say the discourse should be more accessible. The other is to say often these rituals take place in spaces that are not necessarily designed for them. Carnival takes place in the street, that has to be occupied and is consistently under threat. We've got a really lovely depiction of dominoes playing in a pub in Nottingham. It's a pub during the day and a dominoes den in the evening. They pull out mats and stuff. There's a precarity there to these places, these activities not having space. And I suppose we're saying, what happens when you center them and you just give them permission to be? Like, this is the place where you can do this. That would make for such a more rich society, I think. And that's the kind of takeaway.
Before we started rolling on the camera, you spoke about it being a lot of work and people recognizing that it's a lot of work, and that being a kind of a rewarding element of, being here where we are today as the news rolls out of this. So were there any challenges, and how did you overcome them, and in a way that kind of led you to this place where the work now feels rewarding?
Yeah, I think there are a lot. What's to say about that? There are challenges, right? First, the work, right? We don't mind putting in the work, but I suppose what I was saying is it's important for the work to seem effortless. Like, that is a tectonic, it needs to be graceful to a certain degree. And that's why I think that's why it's nice seeing people recognize it, because they're not recognizing it as that looks like hard graft. They're recognizing it by saying, oh, that's really elegant. And it takes a lot of work to get things looking super elegant, super precise, super slick. I think in terms of challenges is that it's a really big project, and it's an amazing opportunity that the British Council have given us. And they've been really supportive of the curatorial agenda. But, there are so many different aspects to it. It's been really tricky to keep hold of all of them. And actually, you need to let some of them go. So, there's a publication, the catalogue that comes with the project. There's a public program that comes with the project. There's like the build element. Then there's the artist liaison. Then there's the film production,
I can imagine.
It's so much. And I think you can't hold all of that information yourself. And the way in which we got around that was people playing to their strengths. I think when the curatorial team was working at its peak and has worked best is when people are doing what they do in normal life, but at a bigger scale, and that they trust other people in different spaces. Manisha was very much on the artist liaison front, like helping get the kind of artists and their commissions ready. Sumitra was very much on text and kind of helping frame the curatorial narrative. Joe's been really involved in the publication. At different times, people have taken different roles in terms of the production of the film. I've done the exhibition design, the practice. So I think getting that making sure that everything is seamless and people know what they're doing was a really key moment.
Why dancing before the moon?
I need to get this because I'm going to misquote it, right? This is the quote. This is a quote by James Baldwin. There is a reason, after all, that some people wish to colonize the moon and others dance before it as an ancient friend. Now, for me, that's about a different relationship to the world in which we live. That it's not only about development, it's not only about ownership, it's got ideas around performance, congregation, friendship, care, a relationship to the land that you're in, passages of time, all of that stuff that affects us in a sentimental way is embodied in that quote. And I suppose that was our guiding kind of, that was our North Star.
Listen, man, you can be proud for bringing it to market, bringing it to life. Is there anything else you want to share with us before we part ways?
I think that's good, but it's really nice to be asked about the exhibition and the round. It's a really enjoyable conversation because, it's all so personal to a certain degree, and it's a really fragile moment when you put it into the world. It's nice to still know that it resonates in our spaces, especially resonates at home for people that can't come to Venice, because I recognize that is a privilege. And I also recognize that, there are a couple of things, but I also recognize that is a British privilege. And that's why we've got this kind of dialogue between us and the British institution. And in some ways, you might frame some of these works as these rituals of people from diasporic heritage. But I just think these rituals are British rituals. I am a British person in the British pavilion, and that's given me a certain privilege, and I feel very honored by that.